Do not be insulted by this, but the numbers now are so small I'm losing interest. Do you find yourself... I mean, we should be further along than we are, or is that unfair of me?
Oh, well, I think it's great that we've had now 8 days in a row with zeros. I never thought I'd be celebrating a zero, but that's good, and that's exactly where we want to be. I think what is important is that we don't lose interest. We have to be absolutely not only interested in the zeros, but we have to be doing all the things we need to do to keep it at zero. That's our aim, and that's why we can, and that's how we will be able to enjoy the freedom of movement we've now got everywhere in the country, except some residual restrictions in Auckland.
So how many of these residual restrictions in Auckland, how many zeros do you need to see until everyone everywhere is back to one?
Well, I think the zeros are important, but it's also just making sure we're not seeing new cases pop up around the city there, and that's why we've got that restriction on gathering size is the main thing, and the Cabinet's made a decision to maintain that for that further 2 weeks from Monday, and then review.
See, I take it closer to the index case of the original community transmission, right?
We haven't found exactly where that's from, but we're still looking.
Do you think you ever will, hand on heart?
I hope we will. I really do. I mean, ESR is working its way through the samples from everyone who's been through a managed isolation facility to see if that's where it's come from. But it may well be that there was some incursion into the country from somewhere, through a port, or just a chance encounter at an airport. Yep. When people came through, and that may be responsible for it. But we're still looking hard.
And isn't that the problem? If you never know, we can never sort of go back to normal because you're always fearful because you don't know if you plug the gap.
Well, I think you've got to put that in the context of actually we've got incredibly tight border restrictions and a very good and constantly improving managed isolation set up with our 14 days and the 2 tests and so on, and it's served us well to date. And not only that, we've shown, as we have in Auckland over the last few weeks, if we do get an incursion, we can get on top of it quickly, which is what we've done.
Well, this is where I think you and I would differ, because it hasn't served us well, because we've been locked back down in level 3 and then 2.5, and this has gone on for well in excess of a month in the country's biggest economy. That's not serving us well at all, is it?
Well, what I would say, Mike, is it's serving us better than the alternative, and I don't need to look too far offshore to see what the alternatives are. And, a short lockdown in Auckland, yes, and it did have an impact, and that's why we moved very quickly to make it as short as possible. But if you look at Europe, the UK, they're going into forms of lockdown now that are going to be much longer and with much, much higher cases numbers.
The National Party's idea of private facilities getting more people into the country, does that freak you out?
Look, actually, Mike, I'm just not going to comment on any party's policy. I can't, because it's a pre-election period. I'm a public servant.
OK, all right, forget it's their policy. As an idea of getting more people into the country in general from what we have at the 7,300, is that doable?
Look, I just am not going to be drawn on that. It's a whole of government response around who comes in, how many people we can look after in managed isolation facilities, and how we prioritise people coming into the country. There are already mechanisms in place to do that, but I'm not going to be drawn on commenting on specific party policies.
What about New South Wales? How can they have 40,000 people at the ANZ Stadium this weekend? Essentially, they've got the same story we have. We can't do that.
Well, let's wait a couple of weekends, and it looks like we'll be able to have 37,000 people at the Sky Stadium in Wellington, and I'm hoping to be one of them if I can get a ticket, and I think that's great.
Yeah, but they're doing that now, we're not.
Well, that's because there are no tests on this weekend. There will be rugby.
No, but I'm talking about attitude
weekend
in general. New South Wales, similar story to us. They seem to be more aggressive in their approach. Why aren't we?
Well, actually, we're swapping notes with them and taking pretty much a very similar approach.
But we're not. They've got 40,000 and we don't.
Yeah, well, if we're 2 weeks behind, I don't think that's too bad.
So that's where you think we're heading?
Well, we are. We've got a Bledisloe Cup test organised for the 11th.
No, I'm talking for the whole country.
Well, I can't preempt Cabinet's decision, which is just under 2 weeks' time for Auckland. The Prime Minister's announced when that decision will be made, and the planning is underway, as you know, for a test on the 18th of October in Auckland, pending it being at alert level 1.
Good on you. Appreciate your time, Ashley Bloomfield. With us this morning.